Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to go back in time, way back to the early years of 2010-ish, when we had games like Manoeuvre, a game that has been on my list for years and years to talk about and go over. It's from GMT from long ago. Again, we're talking, wow, 10, 20, 15 years or so. It's had expansion packs, Distant Lands. Released since it's a chessboard like Napoleonic themed game wherein two players are going to battle it out with their different unique armies. They're going to fight over the territory over the course of about an hour or so, sometimes a little more, and then see who wins. Without further ado, let's take a look at the box. Okay, let's take a look at what comes inside Manoeuvre. You get tiles and cards and dice. Doesn't that sound like very new? What a revolutionary idea. You get lots and lots of terrain cards. These are a way that you can be arranged, oriented, divided, however, in order to form what is effectively the battlefield, which we'll see in just a second. You get a few extra readouts, which we'll use for some of the nations use them, and you get a few extra components dice. But what's big is in these civilizations, each of the nations gets their own set of cards, their own deck with their own propensities and digressions, and 8 units, and these units vary from cavalry or infantry, and with their own special values. We have Americans. This has the Distant Lands expansion, and so it's got Ottomans. It's got the dynasties, and you got Prussia, Austria, Sweden, etc. And then, example of this is a setup I have already to show you from the for our little demonstration of play. And then you get basically the very easy reference sheet. You get gives you the terrain values. It tells you how to handle combat, and then it gives you resolution steps, and then a little bit of an extra information on what each deck comprises for what's inside them. So that's what we've got. And then, of course, the manual. And if you have Distant Lands, this manual supersedes that manual. It has a couple extra rules to speed up the initial part of play, for example. But otherwise, they're very similar in their composition. But that is Manoeuvre. Let's get into an example of play. Okay, so let's talk about how you play Manoeuvre. The object of the game is to win. You win in one of two ways. First off, if you are the first person to take out 5 of your enemy's units, well, you win. Second off, at the end of the day, when it gets into night, because they don't generally fight at night in that era. How does that accomplish? Well, whoever goes to their deck first reshuffles and goes on. The second player to exhaust their deck will trigger the end of the game. So both decks have to be exhausted at least once. When that happens, you are going to get a victory point for every single unit on your side. On the enemy side, this is the midpoint of the battle line. And so when you have a unit here on the other side and it exists, it's going to get a point. It's also going to get a point for every adjacent empty space on the enemy side. This is on my side, so these 3, so that would be 4 points. Now, if somebody was to cover up, say here, then you would not get credit for those points. So there's some jockeying and positioning that you're going to do if it's clear that you're not going to win by attrition. And again, diagonals, nothing diagonal matters in this game. So how do you play the game? Well, each player on their turn is going to go through a series of steps. Those steps are going to determine whether, the action that they take. Let's go into it. The first thing, for example, in Austria, we have these 5 cards. Again, these will be in your hand. Your opponent won't know them, but we're going to play with them open to give you more of an example of what to do. These cards generally map to units you have on the board. 1st Infantry Regiment, actually we have 2 of those. That makes this a pretty powerful unit to begin with. Also, you can have leaders. Leaders are going to give you boosts and enhancements. They can basically do they're the Swiss Army knife of stuff. There's also other cards in the game that let you do guerrilla moves to stop someone from repairing, readouts, which lets you set up defensive measures, etc., forced march, etc. So on your turn, the first thing you're going to do is decide how many of these cards you want to get rid of. That might seem odd, but the reality is there are certain situations where you may find cards that aren't going to do you any good right now, so why not get rid of them? Well, there's a reason. Because again, this is your hit points per se. You may decide you don't want to get rid of these cards because once they're gone, they're generally gone. And so you might not, you want to be judicious in what cards you want to get rid of. For example, we have commanders here. I might decide this commander I could do without if I could get another card that's a infantry regiment. No, I have a skirmish. That's a special action. That could be advantageous. But in general, you don't want to willy-nilly throw your hand away, grab another one, unless you're trying to coerce the end of the game. And get, because you're in a position on the board where that makes sense. Again, tactical, decision making. What's the best in the moment to do. So in our turn, on the first turn, so basically players, one side is going to set up the map, the other side's going to get to decide which side they want to be on, so that way it keeps it fair, because you can configure and take all of these placards and place them in what a way, because all this terrain is going to have some situation or advantage. If you try to make it advantageous on your side, well, your opponent's going to be able to decide which side to be on, so you kind of want to keep it fair for everybody. It's the I cut, you choose kind of approach. Anyway, let's go. On the first turn, this is new for distant lands, you get to move 3 units. First off, I discarded a card, I drew a card, now I'm going to move. So say I'm going to move 2 spaces, because that's cavalry. I'm going to move my 1st regiment, because I got stuff to do, and I'm going to move this cavalry here. Again, you can move 2 spaces, no diagonals. And that's going to be it. If there was a combat, I would be able to take that combat. If not, no. And so restoration phase, all my units are clear, we're good to go. So then it goes to my opponent. My opponent's going to go, seeing based on what you're going to do, I think I want to move 1 space here, because I think you're going to try and take over my town, which has a defensive bonus. I'm going to take my Cossacks and move them 2. Maybe I can do a pincer move. And I'm going to move, based on the cards that I have, the Russian Guard. I don't really have, I could have decided to get rid of a card, but I chose not to. I'm just going to move here. All right, so those are my 3 actions. All right, turn 2, we only move 2 of our units. And then from that point on, we're only going to move 1 of our units. It gets back to the standard flow of play. All right, first infantry is going to move here. We're going to see if we can move this here. And yes, it would be good to get a neoprene board or something. Otherwise, they do tend to slide around the table a bit. All right, and that's that. I decided not to get rid of my cards. Same thing here. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to move 1. I'm going to move this 2. And okay, and now from this point on, it's 1 move, 1 move. And again, we're not in combat yet, so we skip the combat phase and we skip the restoration phase. All right, now we're going to get in. Let me just show you some action, because you're going to want to know what to do. Why are we doing this? Moving is not that fun until it leads to something. We're going to take the 1st regiment and we're going to put, let's say that we have this situation here. Let's say we're over here on this side, and I've got a unit here and here, and so say I'm in this situation where I've decided I've got my cards, I do my move here. I can choose to do an attack action. I can assault, I can ambush, I can volley, or I can bombard. They're all subtle differences in the same action. Assault is the basic attack action, and when that happens, the first thing you do is play a, say I'm going to attack you. This makes the most sense for me right now. Okay, well, I've got 7, you've got 7. The first thing the defender gets to do is decide, do they want to retreat? There are certain cards in the game that you can play that will let you retreat. If I could find some, maybe, but if not, there's several different retreating opportunities. If there we go. Readout. So certain retreating is available. Oh, that's right. It's probably not in this civilization. See, they're so different. But withdraw or if that doesn't work, then you can play unit cards to beef it up. For example, I don't have any unit cards for this unit. If I did, I could have played that card, and that would have helped bolster my defense. Also could play a leader card, and that could add to my as well if I wanted to. I'm not going to, though, because I want to save that leader for later. So once the defender decides what he wants to invest, the attacker can play certain cards. You can play, again, skirmish cards that say, haha, just kidding, I'm not going to attack. But most of the time, you're going to play cards that match up. Like I'm just going to go for broke here. Look at that. Look at that. I'm going to play these 2 cards that match that unit. I could play a leader card. And that leader card gives me 2 options. I can either take the combat value, just like that combat value and add it to it, or I can use command. Command says up to 4 units adjacent to it can attack as well. And so I'm going to tap the 9th Infantry to attack as well. And they get a card as well. So look at that. We basically have just decided we're going to throw our entire army at this one unit. And that unit's going to be like, what did I do? But anyway, so you've got all of that going on. And then you just calculate the attack value and the defense value. Now, because there's no terrain, it's literally 7. That is the strength value. So our defense is 7. Now our attack value, on the other hand, is much different. First off, I'm going to take the 7 here. I'm going to roll a d10 for each of these two and see what happens. 6. Wow, so 7 plus 6. Is that right? Yes, so 7 plus 6 is 13. So I've got 13 from there. Plus I've got 6, so 19, and 2d8. Wait, is that 8? Did I roll the wrong ones? Wait a minute, no. I did roll the wrong ones. That's a D10. Okay, I rolled it wrong. Okay, let's do this again. So 2d10s for the 1st Infantry. Okay, 10. All right, so 7 plus 10 is 17. Now I roll 2d8s. Wow, 13. 17, 13. Wow, that's 30. Plus 6 is 36. Holy smokes. So basically, I just destroyed this. So what happens? So what happens because of that big imbalance? Why would you bother even using extra cards if, well, because you have an opportunity here. Now, if for some reason I'd rolled really badly and I had less than that defense, I would actually take a hit, and all the units supporting it would take a hit. If it was equal, then nothing happens. If it's greater, then the defender either retreats or they take a hit. If it's twice as great, then we get the attacker gets to decide whether the defender retreats or takes a hit. If it's 3 times greater, then they take a hit and they retreat. And if it's 4 times greater, then they just flat out get eliminated. So with 30 to 7, bye-bye. I'm 1/5 to victory now. But all of these cards are discarded. Oh no. And that's that. And that ends my turn. I could, there's no restoration, whatever. You could also use a leader if you wanted to at the end of your turn and say if there was damage on this unit. There are certain cards that let you just automatically restore it to full health. Also, there's a rally where if you roll a 1 to 5 using a leader card, then that rallies them as well. But again, here's the situation now. Well, I basically destroyed that one unit, but I absolutely have nothing on my turn. I have used up a lot of my cards. I'm going to have to draw cards to get back up to 5, and during my opponent's turn, I have nothing with which, there's almost no chance that I have a card that's going to help me if they decide, well, that's nice, but now I'm going to attack. Well, have to move in if you attack. If they decide to attack back. So there you go. It wasn't the wisest choice, but I needed to show you combat in its essence. And again, cavalry can go 2 moves. They can do pursuit. There's some rules for that. There's ambush, where you can just pick any unit on the map and it's just an ambush. It doesn't have a leader unit. There's volley, which means if you're next to it and your card has a volley action, because the volley world isn't closed. There's a pursuit. There's a volley. Yeah, here's a volley. You can just do a flat out attack without assaulting, so you don't have to risk damage. You just do a volley and hope to hit them. Bombard is the same, except it's 2 spaces away, and you have to be in line of sight, etc., etc. But anyway, that's the general essence. There's a lot of stuff. Again, there's terrain that plays a factor and all that stuff. But ultimately, this is battle chess at its most glorious, in my opinion. So anyway, let's get into my final thoughts. All right, final thoughts on Maneuver. All right, first off, as always, we go over the cons first, then we go over the pros, then we go over my final thoughts. Here's what. So first off, in the cons, the there isn't a lot other than to say that this game is going to hit an audience kind of in the middle. There's the Memoir 44 folks, Battle Line folks, and then there's going to be the like true hex and grid counters. This fits in the middle, which is interesting because it's not simple enough that you can just quickly teach it like Memoir 44 per se. And it's also not deep enough that you're going to find people satisfied that it truly represents Napoleonic era warfare down to the very bullet and horseshoe nail, and so it does fit in a middle audience of people. So those on either side are probably going to have to do some work to decide to like it in that regard. Again, the Napoleonic ties are pretty loose. It's not again that you have, although to be fair, I don't think they're that loose, but it's definitely been. It's not something where you're going to find. There are other games that really do more for reenacting true engagements in a high, deep level for that. It is an abstract underpinning of the game. It is yeah, it is almost abstract in the sense of chess movement, chess motion. That said, there's a stacking layer that mitigates that I really enjoy. We'll get into in the pros. Component size, it honestly says something good about the game that those cards are still stupidly hard to shuffle because they're little tiny cards about this big, and they, as you saw, and shuffling them, I ended up just doing the swirling stuff because you want to get a good mix. And it does appear lighter than it. If you set it out in the game, it does look like it could probably be a little lighter. Look, there's just 8 units, and they just have 1 health point, really, and all that stuff. But there is a lot of nuance to it that might not be amenable to, again, to someone who's just going, hey, let's just play a fun little game in 30 minutes. Plenty of games exist now for that. Now let's get into the pros. I really like the unique factions. I like that each faction has its own deck. I like that deck is its deck. It doesn't share. It's greedy. It doesn't play well with others. That's the point. And so you have these factions, and particularly with the distant lands, they do vary, and they vary in a sense of what is emphasized. I like that all of the charts actually give you the breakdown of what's in each of these card decks, so that you have an idea of kind of what you're doing. I really like the rulebook clarity. I like that for the distant lands, just kind of, you can just throw the original one away. I didn't, but you could. It's very clear. It's very quick. It's very concise. Because the game isn't hugely deep. It doesn't need a big manual, but it has enough nuance that you do need to have some things explained, and it does it well. Again, I love the distant lands. I would play with the extra rules, simple as they are, for like boosting to just get things going. Reminds me of like terraforming Mars, when you have like, look, prelude. Let's just get to the point where we start seeing interesting things happen. Why go through the same 10 previews before getting to the actual movie? The same 10. I liken this to meaty chess. There aren't a lot of games that really fit that bill for me really well. This does. In fact, I think one of my favorite games in the 80s was a game called A&D Dark. And AD, it was like AD Dark Legions, which is the first real good feeling of action chess on a board game. This is way back in the late 80s, early 90s. And this kind of feels that same way. You are really tactically, this isn't just a matter of I take out your units, I win. In that regard, something like a Memoir 44 or a simpler game on that level, Blitzkrieg 20, whatever, those are ones that really simplify down to the point where you just kind of throw fest it. There is strategy here. Where you position your units does matter. It's not just about I have more firepower than you and my dice are better than you at this time. Yes, that does make an impact, but you also have feints. You also have opportunities to say, hey, how is it I'm going to commit everything or appear to, and then I'm going to pull back and move away, and you just exhausted cards because you thought I was going to be there. You've got ambush, you've got your bombardments and volleys and all that. You've got locationals. If you don't feel like you're going to take out more than half of their army as a winning condition, then you're going to start being, well, maybe I just need to move into territory and find some nice way to set up territory, so I'm going to get some victory points. The timing of the fact that that it's kind of in your control and yet not in your control. All of these things are things you're not going to hear said in veins to a simple, chess clue, chess chess meets Axis Allies kind of stuff. And so I really like all the nuance that you don't necessarily think is going to be in here, but is. The concise battle stack, I like it. I got a unit. I'm going to take your unit on. You have an opportunity. I play a leader. Maybe it matters. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you save that leader for later. Your cards are finite. You're not going to get a bunch of opportunities with that same unit. It's not going to be like, oh, there's no reshuffle action. Okay, now it's at full strength again. You are finitely set to the cards you're going to use for those units, and so you have to think of that. Makes the trade-offs really interesting on when you fight, when you don't, when you move, when you position. How much of a hill do you want to dial on? Do you want to risk luck? Do you want to not? Does getting into a nice stream, but also moving into positions where you're going to get the most points, victory points, making those final moves to try to starve someone else of victory points so that you can get them. There's a lot here. There's a lot here than might appear to be here. So I still, all these years later, give it an 8 out of 10. I enjoy playing it. If I pull it out and play it, I can teach it in a relatively quick time. People enjoy it. The card play with the dice play, with the intrinsic movement value, with the easy setup, and the fact that you can rearrange this setup and give yourself a little bit of a different puzzle. It's classic play for folks who enjoy sort of a mid filler. Like I got a brain and I got an hour to fill. Good game for this. I really like, again, the interesting duels that you have every time between other players. Stuff can ebb and flow greatly. It can look pretty dire, and then you could come back a lot of the times. You can try and stretch a game out to not give up that fifth unit, and so you can get to the sundown and win a different way. The distillation of all the aspects of wargaming that you're going to have to worry about in a lot of other games. A lot of those are either stripped away or they're distilled down, and so that you can teach them in a very small, teachable moment. Very satisfying time box to this game. When you are playing it for the hour you're playing it, I enjoy it. It's sort of like Memoir 44, as I say, as an antique store. You've got a lot of the bits and pieces of a fun little adventure, but wrapped in this nice. And I love the artwork. I know it's minimalist, and I don't really care. I think it's fantastic for what it is. It is a niche game that fits in well with the rest of the GMT lineup, which again spreads the spectrum from Battle Line to Empire of the South. And so some other ideas like like you can tell in the negative comments that a lot of it's about it being abstracted, it being trimmed down, it not really having a lot of detail that people had hoped for a game that touts itself as Napoleonic. I fit on the right side where it's it's a benchmark for this type of game, and again, it's a very niche, it's a very specific geared type of game. Strategic, beautiful Napoleonic board. Yeah, so these are the general opinions you can have. So that's it. I recommend Manoeuvre if you can get your hands on a copy, particularly with Distant Lands. I know there's been some hubbub recently, some quiet hubbub about maybe even adding additional factions. The designer has been working in providing that a little bit. So hey, maybe we'll see even more Manoeuvre for maneuvering goodness. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.